We are all incredibly grateful, and on behalf of the people of Pakistan, I would like to thank the Secretary General of the United Nations. As you're all well aware, that September is perhaps the busiest month for the Secretary General of the United Nations, with the UN General Assembly to be held later this month. But despite his incredibly busy schedule and many responsibilities, the Secretary General of the United Nations took out time to personally visit Pakistan in our time of difficulty and witness firsthand the devastation that has been caused by the catastrophic monsoon rains that we faced for many months. He spent a busy day in Islamabad yesterday receiving briefings from our National Flood Response Center, and today, along with the Prime Minister, we accompanied the Secretary General on his visit to flood-affected areas in Balochistan, where he met with flood affectees. We then visited flood affectees here in Sindh, in Larkana, and also visited the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Mohenjo-daro, which unfortunately too has been damaged by the monster monsoon rains. The catastrophe that we are facing, the devastation that the people of Pakistan are facing, for which they are paying a heavy price in their lives, in the form of their lives and their livelihoods, is not a catastrophe of their making. The climate change issue that affects the world today, which has caused these monster monsoons, are the result of the industrialization of far bigger countries than Pakistan. The people of Pakistan contribute less than 1% to the global carbon footprint. And while this crisis is not solely of our making, surely the response to this crisis must also be a global response. And with the help of the United Nations Secretary General, we look forward to working with the world, with the global community, to build back better, to rehabilitate and reconstruct the lives of our fellow citizens so that they can withstand extreme climate shock like these going forward. So once again, Secretary General, sir, we're incredibly grateful for your time and for your visit, and we'd like for you to share a few words with the Pakistan.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the media. We have declared war on nature. And as we see here in Pakistan, nature is striking back with devastating consequences. Climate change is supercharging the destruction of our planet. I've seen many humanitarian disasters in the world, but I have never seen climate carnage on this scale. I have simply no words to describe what I've seen today. A flooded area that is 3 times the total area of my own country, Portugal. Over 1,300 lives were lost, tens of millions of people homeless, 1/3 of this vast country submerged, livestock and crops wiped out. But behind these numbers lie unquantifiable depths of human suffering. But I've also seen great heights of human endurance and heroism, from emergency workers to ordinary people helping their neighbors. Of course, we can quote numbers that are appalling, but this is a question about people that suffer. The families that have lost their houses, or members of the family. The farmers that have lost their crops, or their livestock. Those that have no longer the livelihoods they need to sustain their life. And at the same time, the most emotional moment for me during this visit was to listen to a group of women and men that have sacrificed their possessions, the possibility to rescue things from their own houses. They left everything to help neighbors to be rescued, to help neighbors to come out of houses that were falling apart and to be able to reach safety with them. This extraordinary generosity of poor people has touched me deeply, and I hope that this example will be followed by all those in the world that have power to support Pakistan in this hour of need. I want to pay tribute to the gigantic efforts of the Pakistani authorities, civilian and military, national and regional. I also want to thank the civil society, the humanitarian organizations, and also my UN colleagues who have rushed in. And I also want to take profit to thank all those donors that have started to support Pakistan in this terrible hour. The needs are enormous, and I urge massive and urgent financial support for Pakistan. And this is not just a question of solidarity or generosity, it is a question of justice. Pakistan is paying the price of something that was created by others. I have called this a monsoon on steroids, and there is nothing natural about disasters of this scale. Climate change caused by human activity is supercharging storms and catastrophes in Pakistan, but also in Chad, the Horn of Africa with their terrible drought and the risk of famine and beyond. All these countries did not cause the problem, but they are paying the price. These extreme weather events have the fingerprints of human activity all over them, specifically the burning of fossil fuels eating our planet. The G20 countries are responsible for 80% of today's emissions. 1%, 80%. And developed economies are responsible for the vast majority of greenhouse gases throughout history. Here, from Pakistan, I want to reinforce a clear point. Wealthier countries are morally responsible for helping developing countries like Pakistan to recover from disasters like this and to adapt, to build resilience to climate impacts that unfortunately will be repeated in the future. As is painfully evident, those impacts are skyrocketing. People living in high climate vulnerability conditions, including in South Asia, are 15 times more likely to die from climate impacts. Nearly half of humanity is now in this category, the overwhelming majority in the developing world. As Pakistan is deluged, as famine stalks the Horn of Africa, rich countries must step up adaptation finance. At least half of all climate finance must go to adaptation and climate resilience for countries like Pakistan to be able to face the next floods in a way that protects their citizens and protects their economy and their wealth. All countries, with the G20 leading the way, must boost their national emissions reduction targets every year until the world's 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature limit is guaranteed. And we are at risk of making it irreversibly impossible. I have seen an epic human tragedy here in Pakistan, but I also have seen the future. As our planet continues to warm, all countries will increasingly suffer losses and damage from climate beyond their capacity to adapt. Today is Pakistan. Tomorrow it could be your country, wherever you live. This is a global crisis. As the Minister said, it demands a global response. Thank you.
You have seen the disaster with your own eyes. Will you appeal to IMF, World Bank and other countries of Pakistan to waive or reschedule Pakistani loans?
To
Pakistani loans.
Reschedule Pakistan.
Reschedule or waive.
I have been demanding very clearly that the world must seriously adopt a program of debt relief for developing countries, including middle-income countries like Pakistan, that are on the verge of an extremely difficult financial situation. In some cases already, we are seeing defaults coming. It is absolutely essential to create new mechanisms. The mechanisms we have today, the suspension that the G20 declared for the least developed country and the so-called framework for that relief simply do not apply to Pakistan or do not work at all. So we need new mechanisms of debt relief. I've been, to give you an example, strongly advocating for what we can call debt swaps. A country, instead of paying the debt to the creditors, using that money to invest in climate resilience, investments in sustainable infrastructure, and in the green transition of their economies. And this is exactly what Pakistan needs. Instead of paying the debt, being able to invest that money in what the country requires. We will go on strongly advocating for these solutions, namely in the meetings that will take place soon of the IMF and World Bank, but also in the G20 summit that will take place before the end of the year.
Your Excellency,
here is Dr. Kamran
from Neo TV. I have a question with you.
We take a question from Arab, please, then I'll come back to you. Thank you so much. Arab News.
Thank you, Secretary General. Since I'm flying since morning with you, my question is that how quick UN is going to take action for the relief of health of flood affected people in Pakistan and also for education. You know, it is a very important thing. I mean, it should be started very quickly. And sir, second part is, are you going to attend funeral of Queen Elizabeth? Please.
Let's be clear. I cannot answer how quickly it will be possible to address entirely all the challenges of health caused by the floods. I know the government of Pakistan is making a huge effort. I myself have seen one hospital in action, and I believe the international community needs to scale up very quickly their support. I hope it will be as quickly as possible, and I've been talking to WHO for WHO in the limited capacity that it has to fully support the Pakistani government in relation to that objective.
We'll take one last question, please.
Yes, Mr. Excellency, do you feel that the international community...
Sorry, there was a question that I have... Sorry, lady, you asked the question. No, it's just to say that I was in Pakistan and I have not yet been able to contact my headquarters to know what my life will be.
Your Excellency, you see how much Pakistan is affected from the floods and the greed of the G20 countries. Do you feel the response is still very poor from the countries from which the Pakistan is paying the price? And also, kindly tell us about this kind of tragedy Pakistan is facing. Pakistan will lag behind in the SDG goals. How the UN and the nations will help Pakistan to achieve these goals with these kind of problems as well?
Well, let's be clear. Not only the G20 countries have not found the financial mechanisms necessary to support developing countries that face the same kind of challenges that Pakistan is facing. Until now, it has not happened, and we are going to go on insisting for that to happen. And the G20 countries have also not yet guaranteed that they will be able to reduce their emissions as much as is needed for this kind of disasters not to become worse and worse from year to year. So we have two very clear requests for the G20. A request in relation to finance and a request in relation to reduction of emissions. Naturally, the UN will be doing everything we can But we are perfectly aware, and we need to be humble when we see a disaster of this dimension. Our capacity is naturally a limited capacity, but whatever we can do is at the entire disposal of Pakistan.
How about the SDG goals Pakistan can achieve it?
It is clear that the SDGs were already moving out of track when the COVID appeared. Then we had the COVID, and now we have the impacts of climate change. It is clear for the SDGs to be able to accelerate in its implementation. It is clear that we need to address some of the worst crises that we face. Energy crisis, food crisis, finance crisis. And that goes back to the same question that was put. Pakistan must have the resources necessary to recover, to rebuild, to reconstruct, and at the same time to implement the policies that the government has decided for the SDGs to be achievable.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.